Hi, I'm Wendy from Sunflower Publishing from a very cold and wintry Abruzzo evening, and I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to a lady who is her name splashed across this gorgeous, yes, it's Lindsay Marie Morris. And the last letter from Sicily has is out there today. Publication date is today. Now, for an author, I know this is huge, absolutely huge. It's the culmination of all your hard work, your editing, your writing, your research, absolutely everything. So I know that in your world today, this is a real landmark, and this is wonderful. And I really want to thank you for sharing it with me tonight. So, without further ado, I've got a nice little bio, and I'm just going to read this out. Lindsay Marie Morris is a novelist and journalist based in Los Angeles, California. She's a former Shape magazine editor with a passion for storytelling. That's very clear. And she continues to write for various publications. She writes about all sorts of things, business, health, wellness, but she has a particular focus for travel. Okay, so can we start? Well, first of all, welcome, Benvenuti, and thank you for
Thank you.
sharing your publication day with me. This is such an honor. It really is. Tell me how you feel today. What was it like waking up? Is it like Christmas?
It definitely was like Christmas, and I actually woke up automatically at midnight and looked at Amazon and saw it live and
Right,
had a little celebration.
right. Okay. So today then, let's can we talk about the book and then we'll go back in time to talk more about you and where this all started. Now, the last letter from Sicily, as everyone can see. It's really, I don't know who writes the blurb and the synopsis, but it's very beautiful. Beneath the stars, they made a promise. But can love survive an ocean, a war, and the secrets in between? Now, if that doesn't get people getting on their laptop to order the book from Amazon, then I don't know what will. And it's also been billed as, is it Angela Petch fans? Because obviously she does historical fiction. And she messaged me earlier today to say, when will you be doing this interview with Lindsay? Because I want to hear it. So obviously she's now going to be a massive fan of yours. So tell me about the book and the inspiration behind it.
So the inspiration is from the story of my grandparents. My grandparents came from Sicily, and my grandmother came over in the late 30s and moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And she had to be separated from her love, my grandfather. And little did they know that the war would break out and they would be separated for about 8 years, and about 6 of those years without any communication between them. And for me, it always was inspiring. And I really wanted to share that story. And I actually wrote a short story in a creative writing class about 3 years ago. And from that story, I continued writing and eventually realized there was a novel there.
Right.
And yeah, so that's the genesis of The Last Letter from Sicily.
What year was it? This was just before the war? This was just before it all kicked off.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was 19, I believe she moved in 1938.
Right. Right.
My character in the novel, Concetta, who is inspired by the real Concetta, she came over in 1939.
Right. Do you mind if I ask, are your grandparents still alive today?
No, they're
No.
not.
So they haven't seen,
No.
they don't know about this. But your parents in the States, they must be incredibly proud of this story that you've written.
Yes.
How long did it take you to write this? And what was your process? Obviously, you've got this seed of an idea. So what comes next? The research?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Tell us a
So
bit about the
it,
research.
yeah, yeah. So I was writing it on a weekly basis in my creative writing class, and then eventually it got to the point where I was writing in between classes.
Right.
And at some point, I no longer was going to my classes because I was writing. And during COVID, I began writing in more earnest. And I, in the process of writing, realized that an enormous amount of research was necessary in order to produce a story that was true to the time and the experiences that people had
Mm.
at that point. And so one of the things that I did, which was really invaluable, was go to Sardinia,
Mm.
where Gaetano is stationed during the war. I actually lived in Sardinia for a month,
Okay.
and I was in an apartment in Cagliari overlooking the Tyrrhenian Sea and really immersed myself in the cultures, with the people, the language, and I actually came upon an architectural engineer professor who took us, my husband and I, on a tour of bunkers on Santa Laia Hill in
Yes.
Cagliari. And he specializes in World War II architecture. And so I actually got to go in these stone structures, look out to see what the view was, and to see where the anti-aircraft batteries were stationed, to go into these subterranean bunkers, and just to feel just how stifling the
Gosh,
the
absolutely.
atmosphere was, and yet it was surrounded by such beautiful jewel
Yeah.
toned sea.
Yeah. Did you find that the more, I mean, did you know anything about this period of history? Is it something that you'd studied at school? I mean, obviously we all know, the basics, but to do the research that you have, and we'll come on to the prisoners of war and all
Yeah.
of that. This must have been quite an eye-opener for you going down this route, thinking, well, I didn't know that, and my goodness. And yeah, it must have been so enlightening for you.
Oh, definitely. I studied world history in college
Wow.
for one of my courses, and not a single mention of Italy came up during the entire course. And we discussed World War II, but there was maybe a passing reference of Mussolini. But other than that, it left me wondering just what my grandfather, who served in the Italian army, what he might have experienced. And I my for our final paper for that class, we had to write a paper on any subject that we thought was not covered. And so I actually wrote about World War II,
Right.
Italy,
Wow.
and did a little bit of research at that point in time about the bombing campaigns that occurred in Sicily and also in mainland. And I so that I held on to that and was able to reflect on that research that I had done. But also, there was just we are blessed today with the amount of research that's
Yeah,
accessible.
yeah,
And thanks to things like Google Translate, you're able to read the texts from the Italian language. And so I was able to read, I've read memoirs and
yes. Wow.
uh, chronicles that are in the Italian language as well as English. But there is I feel that there is not much that has been written about the Italian campaign,
No,
uh, specifically
no.
Sicily.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, not so very far from me in Abruzzo. We've got the Monte Cassino, and that was a massive war, part of the war, with the
Yes.
fighting and the Germans and the Italians. I mean, I see it all around me. Pescara, which is my nearest town, I mean, that was practically flattened during the war.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of streets of the old town which are left from those days, but you see it all around you, but it's only when you start to put the research in and you start to piece it all together. So as you're doing the research then, are you struggling at this point to think, how's this going to come together? Or does it just see it? Was it like it was meant to just be and it just flowed from you?
So I took the pantser approach of
Okay.
writing from the seat of my pants, which I do not I do not recommend,
Okay.
because I now write from outlines,
Okay.
but it also it allowed for a sense of discovery. And as I would encounter new research, I would find myself drawn to a particular storyline that would be able to that I could use to portray that event in history. And it got to the point in the beginning, this was a story about my grandparents.
Mm,
In the end, this is a story inspired by my grandparents
right.
because the events are the characters are influenced by them, but the story itself is a work of fiction and very heavily influenced by history.
The idea that Concetta, I mean, she's young. She's what was she, 19 when she's going out with Gaetano, and then her father drops this absolute bombshell that the family is going to go and live in America. That is something that must have happened to countless of families. I find it absolutely fascinating because, obviously I'm from England and, many Italians did go and live in England, but many, many millions went to America. And that the stories there are just amazing, aren't they?
Yes.
Going on this boat several days, and then they have this. I don't even know how you can describe it, this sorting out like cattle at Ellis Island,
Yes.
that they have to go through. And if they're not very well, then obviously, as in the younger sister, she
Yes.
couldn't join the family at that time. When you're researching this, I mean, obviously you knew that this was in your family, but researching it as you did, were you just kind of horrified?
Yes, yes. It was just when I was digging into what occurred at entry with Ellis Island,
Yeah.
I found the Ellis Island historical site where it provided a breakdown of each stage of that entry.
Mm,
And there were many stages of the entry, including the medical examination. And they would separate children or the elderly from their families if they were sick. And it must have been maddening and just but with so many people in such a large room, like cattle being herded through. Um, yeah, I think as I was researching it, really, I could see it and
Mhm.
hear it, and
Mhm.
I felt that I needed to describe that experience and
Yeah.
provide the reader in
Oh, you
some
do. Yeah,
insight.
you really do. It's quite an emotional. I mean, there are lots of stories out there. I know that, but each one just has its own tear-jerking sort of set of emotion that goes with it, doesn't it? I mean, for
Mhm.
these people, I mean, most of them probably came from southern Italy, Abruzzo, obviously.
Yeah,
Not so many, perhaps, from northern Italy, because northern Italy's always had that reputation of being a little bit having a little bit more money
right.
and things. So it was really, I suppose, from Abruzzo down to Sicily, where these and millions there were. I wrote it down somewhere. I just could not believe how many actually would have gone to the States for a new life. And was it a new life? How much of a new life was it? How easy was it? Well, it wasn't, was it? Because they
No.
didn't speak the language. There were challenges with somewhere to stay and getting jobs. And every one that you read is just so unbelievably harrowing. And you
Right.
pull this in through the book because this is part of the love story.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's just it's beautiful. It
Thank
really
you.
is.
Thank you. Yes, and when they landed, so many of them thought that there was going to be opportunity available, and what they instead experienced was xenophobia
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
they and prejudice,
Yeah.
and it was very difficult for these people to land and especially after World War II started, when they were labeled as enemy aliens.
Yeah, absolutely. I made a note that between 1880, and like I say, these stories fascinate me, between 1880 and 1924, a little bit before your period, 4 million, four
Yes.
million emigrated to flee the poverty. And as someone who has emigrated to Italy, how easy is it? Well, even for me or for expats now, it's really still not that easy. Language difference, culture difference, challenges of all sorts of things, getting the job, having somewhere to live. So one only can imagine how difficult it would have been at that time to do that. And as we know, Conchetta just ends up working in a sweatshop factory, which is not really what she wanted. And this is a lovely bit where you pull into the narrative about films that they go and see, music that they listen to, because that's incredibly important. People listen to music anywhere.
Yes.
And the idea that the women of the family would pull together to what's the word? To continue the customs and the traditions that they had left. The food
Yes.
preparation. I love that. I mean, I said that in my book review, I think. I love that authenticity because that's there now. It's absolutely there now. It's never left any Italians. But I can only imagine that Italians going to live in a completely alien country. You would want your bacala on Christmas Eve. You would want to make your Christmas cookies because this pulls you together. And I think that the resolve to survive. I think that's it comes through in the book, really, the resolve to survive. And I think just becomes, the legacy for future generations. I mean, you have got Italian ancestry. Do you think that makes you stronger because you've got Italian DNA?
Well, I don't know if it makes me stronger, but I think being closer to my DNA, being closer to that heritage has really helped shape my character.
Right,
Growing up, my mother is 100% Sicilian because her
right.
parents both came from Sicily, and she was first generation American. And I was the way that she raised us was very much influenced by old world. And I felt Italian always,
Mm,
even though my father was of Swedish and Welsh ancestry. The Italianness really
yeah,
seeped through.
yeah. And how do you feel when you return to Italy? Is it and you step onto Italian soil? Does that feel like going home?
You know, when I went back to Porticello for the first time, I went with my husband for our honeymoon, and it was magical. It was like coming home, and to just see these relatives that I had talked to on the telephone at each holiday. Now we do WhatsApp, and my mother's all of her first cousins and her aunts and uncles are there.
Mm,
Because her father was the only one who emigrated to the United States from
right.
his family.
Yeah.
And so I do have family that lives in the Palermo area and in Porticello.
Mm. I've been to Sicily a couple of times. Catania, absolutely adore Catania. And we did sail from Palermo. I think we decided to catch there was what do you call it? Not ferry, barca. Yeah, ferry, really, I suppose.
Yeah,
Ferry
yeah.
from Palermo up to Genoa because we were traveling back to England. So we have seen a little bit of it, and it's absolutely beautiful. It really is. Um, just moving to something else in the book, and we don't want to give any spoilers, I know we don't, but something else that splits these lovers is the war. Not only has Conchetta moved to America with her family to start a new life, but now we have the war. Not only that, with the history that Italy had, unfortunately, they were not on the same side anymore, and were they really? So
Right.
that made it even more difficult for
That's
them
right.
to communicate in any way. Talk me through, well, I know because I've read the book. There's a few things that Gaetano had of Conchetta's. Tell me about those, and what did Gaetano give to Conchetta to say, let's keep this relationship alive?
So his parting gift to Conchetta is a fountain pen, and he gives it to her because he wants her to write to him. But it's more than that. It's instilling this thread that they have between them, this connection, and it. She has in the past given him a copy of Dante's Divine Comedy. And she, in her departure, she has given him a photograph.
Mm,
And he uses that photograph as the bookmark in the Divine Comedy as he's reading it.
mm,
He also, for a Christmas present previously, had given her a Puccini record. And while they're separated, she listens to her Puccini and he reads his Divine Comedy to think of her. And she uses that pen to write those letters.
It's quite incredible how you pulled all those things together. And I did commend you in my review about the research that you've done for this because I had no idea until I read the book how many Italian prisoners of war were sent to America. I mean, I know many were sent to the UK because I've seen the prisoners of war camps that they're still there. But just tell us a little bit about why they sent them to the States and what happened when they became prisoners of war.
Yes, it was a surprise to me as well.
Mm.
However, I later learned that my aunt's father was actually an interpreter at one of these camps. And they were camps that were, there was a constellation of camps across the United States, and there were 51,000 Italian soldiers that were sent to the US as prisoners of war. And the rest were sent to other points such as England and Australia even. And the the prisoners of war were given they were living in barracks and that had been built specifically for the prisoners, and they had barbed wire fences, and they had uniforms that said prisoner of war, POW or PW. And they, but the interesting thing was they had good food
Mm.
because the Americans were observing the Geneva Convention.
Right, right.
And so sometimes, which what I found was interesting was these prisoners of war were actually eating better than the American public during wartime rationing. But the one of the things that came about during when they were after they had been captured and sent to the United States, there was the armistice that was signed between Italy and the United States in September of 1943. And that actually changed the whole game for the
Mm.
prisoner of war situation. The prisoners of war were given the option to join the Italian service units. It was a group that would actually align themselves with the US, and they would have more privileges, and they were given a promise that they would be able to return to Italy sooner. And the there were there was the about 80% of the men actually chose to, because they were
Yeah.
given that choice, they
But
chose to accept it. Hmm.
what a choice to have to make for so many of them.
Yes.
I
Yes.
can't imagine how I'm sure many did wrestle with their conscience and decided they wouldn't do that. I mean, they've just spent all these years fighting the Americans, and now they're being asked to
Yes.
literally
Yes.
change sides. I was just I didn't know about that, and I did re I when I was doing some research myself for the review, I heard that Americans were regarded as one of the more humane captors, which I think is really nice to know. And I feel as if I would like to take comfort from the fact that if they did get to America, and some did, like Gaetano in the book, he wasn't so badly treated.
Right.
That's a nice thing to know. I would take comfort from that if my ancestors had done that. Um,
Right.
so that's I mean it's just amazing that they had this opportunity. I think it says
Mhm.
something about the Americans, don't you? The British, I I couldn't find much about that in the UK. Now, I know that 157,000 were held in the UK. 25,000 of those decided to stay after the war. So that's
Says something.
not a bad percentage. And many volunteered just to work in Britain. So within the book now, we've now got the war and emigrating to the States has completely changed the whole lives of the characters. Completely, hasn't it,
Yes,
really?
right.
When you were writing the book, did you think you wanted a happy ending, or wouldn't it have mattered if there wasn't a happy ending? Would it have mattered? How would you have? Did you wrestle with any of this, thinking,
Yeah, I think one of the things that is for me important was to leave some questions for the reader
right,
and some hope.
right,
And I think that I didn't want to have it all wrapped up
yeah,
because
absolutely,
I think the reality of the the situation after the war for Italy and the United States was complicated.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
it, so I think that colored the way that I approached the
Shit.
ending.
Right. Is there another book? Is there a sequel to this? Is there another story? I mean, there's so much that you could do with these, take it to the take it to the next level in some ways. I just have to say, I love the cover. Who designed the
Oh.
cover? Who did that for you? The publisher.
So that was Storm Publishing is my
Okay.
publisher,
Yeah.
and Eileen Carey is a brilliant designer, and
Right.
she did the cover.
Right.
I was just amazed when I first saw it because they
Yeah.
gave it to me and they said, "What do you think?" And I loved it immediately. It
Absolutely.
spoke to everything that I wanted to capture, just the mood and the colors
Yeah.
and those ominous planes flying overhead
Yeah.
above the beautiful
It
colors.
is. It's quite superb. It really is. And the title, was that your title or their title?
So my title had been Separato,
Okay.
and which would have been entirely, I I think now the last letter from Sicily fits the book in a way
Absolutely.
that I would never have realized.
No.
And I am so grateful that Storm came up with that.
Yeah.
My editor, Kate Smith, is brilliant, and she proposed that title. And it really speaks to that final connection that they had. And it really is, and the thread that was between them, that very delicate thread that having a last letter would change everything.
It's quite beautiful. You must be incredibly proud.
I am. I'm very proud.
I can see it. You must be beaming
Yes,
all day now.
yes,
The other thing I
yes.
would
It's
just want
very exciting.
I can imagine. I can imagine. The other thing I just wanted to sort of quickly touch on. I mean, now you're a published author. I mean, that's something. I mean, you've got a very impressive CV anyway. Oh, you don't call it a CV. What do you call it in the States? A bio?
Resume,
A resume. That's it.
resume.
Yeah, we
Yes,
always say CV.
yes.
So now that you've got this, and now you can include published author you've done a lot of writing, so obviously you understand writing, you understand what appeals because you've done that. So when you were writing your story, The Last Letter, how did you have an agent first? Talk me through the publishing process.
Yes, I did not have an agent, and I was really during the process of writing it, I would attend lots of webinars through Writer's Digest, And I joined organizations like the Women's Fiction Writers Association and Authors Guild. And I found their resources invaluable. And I I attended conferences like the Historical Novel Society conference, and all of this helped me prepare the manuscript to where it needed to be. But I believe that the so much of the process of being a writer is a very singular, isolated process where you feel like you're going it alone, and it you don't know how others are going to perceive what you're writing. And so one of the things that I found valuable was to use beta readers.
Right.
And I had originally queried this before getting beta readers,
Right.
but after my beta readers, I found myself reshaping the story
Mm.
it made it better. And because when you have somebody outside of your head looking at it and seeing how they receive and perceive, it really made a difference. And so after I had a round of beta readers, I went back to the query process and I sent off a batch to agents and publishers. And nearly a week later, I received an email from Kate Smith at Storm Publishing, who said that she was reading the manuscript, that she was enjoying it, and that she was going to get back to me with her assessment. And I was ecstatic. And so after another week, she got back to me and asked me if I had a second book in mind, because she said that they were very interested in this book and they wanted to know if there was a second book because they wanted to offer me a two-book deal. And I had written about 7,000 words of another book and had put it in a drawer. And I didn't think I was going to do anything with it. And at that moment, I thought, well, I guess I have to bring that out of the drawer.
Yeah,
And
yeah. It's
so
just on.
I
Right.
I emailed that off to her and I said, it's only 7,000 words,
But
but let me know if this is of
wow.
interest. And it was. And so I landed the deal. And so that second book, the first book, it took me about 3 years to write. The second book, it took me about 3 or 4 months to write because I had a deadline. And being a journalist, I know deadlines.
Mm.
And that book will be coming out in June.
Right. This is the stuff that dreams are made of, aren't they? I mean, I always thought, and we always sort of say to people on our writing retreat here, that if you have a good product, which you do, if you have a thick skin, I don't know if you do or not, and you have a good wind behind you, you just stand a chance. You just stand a chance. And you are absolutely living proof that everyone deserves a chance. And you've got this amazing product as well. So I think obviously that for you was just superb. So the next book is due out in June of this year, right? Can you tell us anything about that, or is that top secret?
So that is also set during World War II.
Okay.
And it is partially set in Sicily again.
All right.
And that deals with themes of love, loss, displacement, and survival.
Wow.
And I think I'll leave it there.
Yes, are you? Yes. Okay. So it's kind of a watch this space, really, isn't it? Right. So
That's really
I'm
it.
going to put you on the spot now. So, couple of questions. Book reviews. Now, I know this is the first one, really. So obviously, there's not going to be any bad reviews. But if there was a bad review, how would you deal with it?
I understand that people receive and perceive your book differently. And I just myself, when I'm reading a book, I know that each book is not for everyone. And I think that people will have their own points of view, and I respect that. And when I when I was going through the beta reading process, for example, and there was a very harsh piece of feedback that I received, which ultimately changed the course of the book in a positive way, and I'm so grateful for that. I think that I learn from critiques,
Yeah.
and I have developed a thick skin because of that.
Mm.
You have to. As a journalist, my work is constantly being evaluated and read.
Yeah.
And I've been a journalist for about 25 years. So I think I have dealt with that. And I
It's
know that, um,
interesting.
yeah,
I can't imagine once you've written a book and you put yourself out there and it's on Amazon and it's on Goodreads or NetGalley, I'm sure I'd be mo mortified if somebody said something not very nice about it. But I think you do have to have an author profile. You do. Well, and we'll talk about that before we finish. You've got all your social media accounts, you've got your website. You're out there. This is me, Lindsay. This is my book. I think it kind of goes with the territory a little bit, does it not? I guess.
yes,
Um,
definitely.
what was the hardest scene to write in the book?
Hmm. I believe that, well, for me, writing the scenes that dealt with Gaetano's military experience were hard because they required a lot of research.
Yeah.
But when I went to Sardinia, and like I said, when I stood there on that hill and really absorbed what it was like to stand in a bunker, I had a new perspective and a new drive to get those details right. And I found myself really enjoying writing from Gaetano's perspective after that.
Mm.
But it had been the challenge in the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. What does literary success mean to you? Money, fame, or both?
Well, I don't know about any of that, but I believe that for me, it's really about sharing a story, and it that is the heart of it for me. And I it drives me, and I want others to learn something from what I write, in whether it's through my journalism or through my novel writing.
Interesting. What advice would you give to aspiring writers looking for the Holy Grail, a publishing contract? Best piece of advice.
Yes, I would say read,
Okay.
continue reading, because you learn from other writers a lot about building and structure. And when it comes to writing, it's important to set goals for yourself, because a lot of people will start a book project and not continue. The majority of people will not. And if you write every day or at least every weekday, which is what I do. And if you aim for about 500 words, start there. And then once you've hit that, start doubling it.
Right.
And then you realize you find yourself in the zone and it becomes a part of your life. It becomes like fitness or diet. It's something that you can thrive on. And I think it's just being in the process of writing a novel is just, it's really engaging and it's a thrilling ride.
Good advice. What was your favorite childhood book?
So when I was little, I read the Little House on the Prairie series by Laura Ingalls Wilder, which is what influenced Josephina's taste in literature.
Mhm.
And I really found myself immersed in that. And I was an early reader. And
Mhm.
so I think I was maybe in first grade when I read the series. And yeah, I
Lovely.
think it was Laura Ingalls Wilder.
I remember watching them. Was that that was the Good Night, John Boy? Good night. That it was that, wasn't it?
Yes, yes.
I think we've all
With
grown up
Michael
with that
Landon. Yes.
one. Yeah, no, lovely book. Okay, so I think I've asked all my questions, which is absolutely wonderful. The book is available. It was available on pre-order. Now, obviously, publication day. Yeah, people can buy it on Amazon. Your website is lindsaymarieMorris.com. You're not on Facebook, are you? You're on Instagram and LinkedIn?
Well, I do have a Facebook profile that is currently a personal profile, but
Okay.
I am thinking
Well,
about that. Um, but I am on Threads.
yeah.
I'm on Twitter or
Right.
X,
Right.
and
Okay.
and Instagram and LinkedIn.
Right. Wonderful.
And yeah, I do have a newsletter that people
Yes.
can sign up
Yes, I
for
saw
on
that.
my website.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that.
So,
But I'm so thrilled that you've found time, excuse me, to just have a quick word about it because I never know what I'm going to read. And I think that there were some themes in the book that were very close to my heart. I think really, just the idea that people left Italy. And you wonder why people do, because it's such a beautiful country. But I've moved myself here, so I know what it's like to be an immigrant or expat, as we call it. But it's a really, really beautiful book, beautiful cover and title. So what can I say? But I wish you absolute success with this. And when you come to Abruzzo, because you said you might do, but who is it you
yes.
know? Is it your, what was it your husband's
So
father?
my husband has had his ancestors who came from Abruzzo to
Because
the
you
east
mention it in the
coast of the
book, and I
United
thought, oh,
States.
how wonderful. So
Yes.
whereabouts in Abruzzo? Do you know where exactly or
Yes. Archi
oh, okay.
and Chieti.
Right. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. So hopefully when you come over to Italy, yeah, please look me up and yeah, it'd be lovely to catch up with you. Wishing you an absolute sacco di back full of success with this. Oh, do you speak Italian, by the way?
I actually do not. I speak, well, I will say that I understand a lot more than I
Yeah.
can speak. And that comes from being surrounded by a bunch of Sicilians growing up.
Yeah, I can imagine. How wonderful. Well, thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure. It really has. And I just can't say, absolutely beautiful book. Really.
Thank you
Really
so much.
stunning. Okay. Take care. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Arrivederci. Ciao.